like a ring of solid gold, like a vow that is tested, like a covenant of old. Your love is enduring through the winter rain, beyond the horizon, and merciful today. Faithful you have been, and faithful you will be. You pledge yourself to me, and it's why I sing. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You father the orphan, kindness makes us whole. You shoulder weakness, strength becomes our own. You're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty from ashes. You will have your bride, free of all her guilt, rid of all her shame, and known by her true name. And it's why I sing. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will. Let's do the second verse again. Ever be on my lips. You father the orphan, kindness makes us whole. You shoulder a weakness, strength becomes our own. You're making me like you, clothing me in white, bringing beauty from ashes. You will have your bride, free of all her guilt, rid of all her shame, and known by her true name. And it's why I sing. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. And it's why I sing. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Ever be on, ever be on, ever be on, ever be on my lips. Welcome everybody again. I see some new faces here this week too, so that's exciting. You know, last week we heard from Ron, and you know, I actually, I have some call and response going. You know, last week right before Ron spoke, I talked about how excited I always am to have people who don't usually lead the service because everybody has sort of this unique relationship with God and everybody has something unique to give. And I think if for everybody that was there last week, you all know that it was just wonderful. And so I'm really excited to hear from Todd this week. And actually, just talking about how unique everything, like everybody, the way everybody interacts with God is. So I text everybody that is gonna speak the next day about what they're talking on, usually on Friday or Saturday, because I post on Facebook about it. And so I text Todd yesterday. I said, "Hey, are you leading the service yesterday?" He said, "God, but I might open and close." I said, "Okay, so do you have any idea what you're speaking on?" He's like, "Nope, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out tomorrow. I'll talk to God and see what's gonna happen." And then, at just like an hour apart, I get a text from Kevin about how he wanted me to be here a little bit early so that he could take a picture of us in preparation for him leading next week. So to me, I think that's just really cool because everybody has sort of a different way that they interact with God and give that to us. And I think that the contrast between that is really the best way to get the full character of God. So I'm really excited today to hear from Todd or whatever you have planned. But first, Elijah, you have something for us?
I guess my thought can kind of go off what Will was talking about right there. It's just kind of letting God work through your life in the different things that we do in our day-to-day walks. I saw a video about Tim Tebow, and basically like his big testimony he had in college. So those of you who don't know, Tim Tebow is a college quarterback that played for Florida. Well, he talked about one day he was getting prepared for this big game against, I think it was against Georgia, he said. But it's this big moment where he's in the locker room. The whole team's like getting psyched up, and they're putting on their pads and everything. They're getting ready to go have this big game. And he noticed some of his buddies that were playing in the game started putting eye black on, and they started like writing things in it like game time and just different little funny things. And this started his whole start where he would put Philippians 4:13 on his eyes, like in the eye black. He would take a little Sharpie and write that down. But he said in the moment of thinking about what verse should he put, he said he prayed about it. And the verse that came to his mind just kind of off the top of his head was Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And he talked about how like that is like the Christian athlete. Like that's the verse that they like to put on there because it's like, yeah, I'm going to have the strength to do anything to win the game. And he said he put that on there, but he didn't really like feel like that's really what God wanted on there, if that made sense. He didn't feel quite like, he didn't feel wrong about it, but he said he just didn't pop. He didn't feel like that was what was from God that he wanted. But he felt like at the time like that was the best thing for him to do. So he wore it, and the next week he said he really felt in his heart to change it after he beat Georgia. So he went to the national title game. So he's in like the biggest game of his life, and he really felt in his heart that God was telling him to put a different verse on there. So he's thinking like, what as a Christian can I do to get people to really get the essence of God in one verse? And so he was like agonizing over it, and he said the verse that came to his mind was John 3:16. And he said how great that was, like how he thought like that is the essence of God, and the essence of Christ coming is that Christ came to die for us, for your sins and for mine. And so he said he put that on there, and he really felt good about it, but he didn't really think like anything was really going to come of it. And he said after the game, I can't remember what he said if he won or not, but he said after the game, he was going to the press conference, and their media director or whatever at Florida came to him and said, "Tim, do you realize what happened?" And he goes, I think they won the game. So he goes, "Yeah, we just won the national title game." And he's like, No. Do you realize what happened? And he's like, "What?" He said, "Because you wrote John 3:16 on your eye black, 90-something million." I think he said 95. Don't quote me on that. But I think 95 million people Googled John 3:16 because of one little thing that he did. Because he wrote John 3:16 on his eye black. And he said afterwards he was like how crazy it was that 95 million people that watched that game didn't know what that verse meant. But he said it was just this little thing that he did in his day-to-day walk with God that he really didn't feel like it was something like huge. It wasn't something that he thought was anything that was a big deal, but it turned into a big deal because of what God can do with a little bit of effort and just a little bit of being aware of what's happening, being just having that constant flow of communication with God, just what little things can happen from just a little bit of effort with God. And so he said 3 years later to the day, they were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers in a playoff game and didn't think anything of it. And after the game, he won the game. Throw that in for Kylie. Beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's going to the press conference, and their media director for the Broncos, this is the time he was playing in the NFL at that point, stopped him and said, "Timmy, do you know what just happened?" He's like, "Yeah, we just won the game. We're going to go play the Patriots next week." And he said, No. Do you realize what happened? And he was like, kind of looked at him and goes, No, what's up? And he said, "You threw for 316 yards. And he was like, "Well, that's kind of funny." He said, "But do you know what happened?" He said 90 million people Googled John 3:16. He didn't have anything on his eye black because the NFL wouldn't allow him to. But he threw for exactly 316 yards. And that fact popped up because it was 3 years to the day that he wrote his eye black, John 3:16. And he thought that was pretty crazy. But 90 million people, because he put a little bit of effort into putting some words on his eye black, that 90 people basically saw and got to look up what the Bible is all about, what God is all about, is love and him coming to die for us. So this week, my prayer is that we take those moments where we maybe think an interaction with someone isn't a big deal, but we pray and we have that constant communication with God, and we make those little moments in our life mean a little bit more. So we put a little bit more effort into doing what God wants us to do in those moments, and just watch what he can do, because God is a great God, and he's a big God, and he can do incredible things with just a little bit of effort. So that's my prayer today. If anybody has any prayer requests, I'll go ahead and take those right now.
If I hold this, it'll be down here. Does it fit in here? Yeah, there we go. Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks. Well, actually, Will got quite a bit of that right, but I didn't actually think that God was going to tell me what to say at that point. Kind of the way those things work, and I have appreciated, the things that Elijah and Will even started out with today. For me, a lot of times I'm thinking about things, but I don't really, sometimes it's things that inspire you, or your heart can kind of draw you a different direction. Maybe you don't feel like, well, I don't know really how that all would, have any impact. So maybe you start reading some things that you're inspired with. Maybe it's in a little different area. And so for me, and I there again, Will talking about diversity and the way God works with each one of us. That is the beauty of the way of what we should get out of that, is that there really our ways of thinking, our ways of working, and how God deals with us should give us all confidence that it's not about how you do. It's really more about being open to let God use you in whatever way he would see fit. So for me, in my experiences, in my journey, in the way that I would go, I'm really, really dependent on God. Matter of fact, if he doesn't give me inspiration, I hope it's really bad, and that's because I don't really want to get up here and impress somebody with my own intellectual ability to get you all thinking or something along that line. If God doesn't speak to someone's heart through what's going on, then to me, it's really pretty mute, That's why it was pretty inspiring to me when Will was talking. He started speaking about relationships and how he had that on his mind this morning, because that was really one of the things I began to originally think about, not so much from a scriptural standpoint, but from an experience type of a standpoint. But I kind of moved on to that, and I read some other things and, was just kind of feeling out. But that was the thing that I really felt inspired with when you were speaking there. I felt like, oh, okay, now I kind of know And then with some things Elijah said too. Now I kind of got this idea where I think God wants to go, but I still am not really sure how that's going to happen. So, but I know there's a lot of things in each one of us that are experiences and things that we've come to understand and learn. And so I'm just depending on God that he'll somehow help me get the right stuff out that I'm feeling today. And of course, a lot of it, you know, I've been on this, I've been on this cruise ship for a week and had an opportunity to interact with a lot of different people. And I'm not, you know, I'm not really a music guy, you know, so it's not like I think I heard one, you know, prior to Neil. I think the only paid concert I'd ever gone to was maybe a Bee Gees concert when I was in high school. So, and then I think it was just to impress a girl or something like that. So I just, you know, I wasn't drawn to all the great 80s, you know, 70s, 80s bands I missed, I guess. So it's a very unusual environment for me. It's a place that I don't really fit in a natural sense. Because a lot of times somebody will, you know, I remember walking into some different places, being in London and seeing, and I'm not even going to remember his name. Which is really sad. But I remember being introduced to somebody and being like, "Hi, how you doing? You know, nice to meet you." And then somebody going, "Do you know who that was?" And I'm like, "No, you know, that's the original guitar player for Genesis, you know." So Steve Hackett, I just didn't know who he was. I mean, because there's other people I would have known, but he just wasn't one. Or going in and sitting down in a rehearsal to help Neil on one of these ships, and John Anderson coming in. I had no idea who John Anderson was. It's kind of, you know, in prog music, I'm kind of like the Forrest Gump, you know. I find myself sometimes in situations I'm sitting there going, there are people who would kill for this, and I don't really fully understand what's going on at this moment. So, you know, but that's just the uniqueness of the way God seems to open doors. And when we think of God and our relationship with him, there's a lot of things that he takes us through our experiences. I thought of these songs we were playing, this one about, you know, we sing about, you know, that at the mention of his name, chains break. But then we also sing a song that says, you know, you're not moving the mountains I want you to move. And you're not creating the, you know, the opportunities of what I think should happen here. I'm asking for help, and I'm not always seeing the deliverance in those areas. But it's through the things that we go through and that we experience begin to affect our thinking. And they change how we perceive life. And it is that experience that we go through that affects other people. There's no way I can know, and there's no way that you can know how many people watch you from a distance and how many people are aware of the things that you're going through and the things in your life, and people that you might not even be that close to. They see. And sometimes the things that we experience and we go through can be a tremendous inspiration to others, especially when things don't always go right. And yet God is able to give us some kind of peace to help us through that difficult situation. I thought of Tim Tebow's, you know, his first one of what was that, Philippians 3:14? 4:13. Yeah, I'm a little dyslexic. Please forgive me. So I'm not being funny, but it is, you know, it is just, I deal with it. So, but I was thinking about that, you know, probably that scripture probably applied more to losing a national championship or a football game or a playoff game than it did to winning it. And sometimes we can take things and our mindset is we grab onto something and we begin to apply it the way that it's the most inspiring to us. But I was just gonna read what comes right before that. And let's see, here we go. He says, "Not that I speak in respect of want, For I have learned in whatsoever state I am to be content. I know both how to be abased and how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to throw the winning touchdown pass, or I'm going to become the most successful in the corporate ladder, or in competition I come out on top. It means that whatever comes my way, Paul had learned that, there were going to be successes, but there were going to be failures, and there were going to be difficulties and times of need, times that he wasn't seeing the things happen that he wanted to happen. And yet, even in those times, he knew that the Spirit of God had the ability to strengthen him and to help him through those things. And that's a peace that is beyond understanding. And so I've learned through my own experiences, and sometimes we're slow learners. I don't know that God's a slow teacher, but I think we're slow learners. We learn in little bits, and as God helps us along and reveals to us more of His way of working with us, each in a very individual way. And I've thought about this experience. So we got cameras rolling here, so I try to not. I always like to be, when it's sharing like personal thoughts or things along that line, or something that might affect someone else, then I want to be careful. I always want to be concerned about other people, how they might view certain things. So I won't use names or anything like that. But I remember a period of time. It was in I think 2010, and it was probably the first opportunity I really had to do anything with Neil. And it was one of those God things. It was something. Transatlantic had just put together their first album after being separated, and Neil quitting all of his bands, and so I didn't really want to be involved. For not that I was very for it, but I just had this little bit of a chip thing on my shoulder. Neil bought me a shirt once that said "Not a fan." Okay, so I'm kind of like anti-fan. I like to have friends. I want to be somebody's friend. I'm not Neil's fan. Okay, I'm his friend. I'll do anything for the guy, but it's not because I'm his fan. I appreciate what he can do. It's impressive, but that's the last thing I want people to think, that I'm somehow his fan, that I'm getting something out of this that way. So, okay, now I know that's over the top. So if you're a fan, it's okay. Okay, this is just an issue I deal with. So I know I had that kind of chip on my shoulder that said that, and so I was always trying to be nice and courteous, but I tried to make it very, very clear I'm not a fan. So when he decided to do this, and we had talked, and he said, well, couldn't you like just come to the first couple with me and pray with me, be a support to me. And so I said, well, I'll pray about it, but I don't know. I don't know. And so I did. I prayed about it. And I didn't really have much work at the time, so I decided I felt like I should go. So at the last minute, I booked my ticket. I had some free miles because the economy was terrible at that period of time, and we just didn't have anything to do. So I had some free miles. So I thought, well, I want to leverage these. I want to get the most out of them. I'm kind of a, get the most out of it guy sometimes. And so I thought, well, okay, he's playing in L.A., Whittier, and then San Francisco, and then Chicago. So if I get a ticket to California, I don't want to waste my miles on a ticket from California, from L.A. to San Francisco. It's a cheap flight. I'll fly up there on my own money, and then I'll just fly from San Francisco to Chicago, and then I'll get the cheap flight back. So I booked my tickets. I got to the last ticket, and I didn't get the cheap flight from Chicago. It was too late. I booked it too late, so I had to pay the full price fare. I was very unhappy. It was one of those mountains that I felt like God, like, hey, if you want me to do this, I mean, come on, I didn't even get the cheap fare. What? I mean, are you really in this? So sometimes we gauge things monetarily, and that can be that can really deprive you of an opportunity that maybe God wants to show you multiple things. So I remember the night before I was praying, and the night before I left, they started having this ash cloud problem. I don't know if you guys remember that. Remember that ash cloud in the Greenland or Iceland or one of them lands up there? It went off, and they couldn't fly intercontinental, and so from the U.S. to Europe. And so I'd been praying about it, and I told Sue the night before, and I asked her. I told her, I said, well, for all you guys out there that have either a significant other or you're working on it, I said, I got two things I want to tell, or I said, I want to tell you something. And she said, I got two questions. I mean, I haven't even said anything yet. And she said, I got two questions for you. And I said, well, what's that? And she said, I want to know, how long have you known and why are you telling me now? So anyways, I said, well, I just have this like feeling like I'm going to be on this whole North American side. And she said, okay, well, you better take your passport. And then she said, okay, well, what about the Europe thing? What's going on with that? What are you feeling about that? And I was like, well, I don't really feel like maybe I should do that. But I told God, if this thing happens with this individual and they ask me to go, then I'll know that I should go. And she understood that what I was asking was pretty much an impossibility because of my like chip on the shoulder, not a fan. I didn't really have any kind of relationship with anybody else other than Neil. And so when I got to California, Sherry and Neil asked me, they said, we can't get our guy in. We're going to reroute him and get him into Chicago. Could you run merch for us the first three shows? And I was like, well, I think I could do that. And so Sherry was there. I hadn't done it before. And so Sherry was there, and that first show, she kind of showed me how to do it. And then after the show, and I'm trying to be as general as I can, but the tour manager came over and he said, you've got another job too. And I was like, okay, what do I do? And so he gave me a task, unimportant what it was, but it wasn't like a really cool thing. Okay. It just wasn't. And it was going to put me in other people's space that I didn't really want to do this. Because I didn't want to be perceived in the wrong way as like trying to work myself into somebody else's zone, their area, musician-wise. And so I was strong with it. And, of course, when Neil found out about it, he was like, no, you're not going to do that, because he knew I didn't really have a relationship there, and this was a little bit personal. And so he's like, no way. I'm telling the tour manager, you get another guy. You're not doing that. And so I told him, well, I'll talk to you in the morning. And so on my way home, I was staying with some family. I was just praying about it. I was like, God, I was kind of laughing. I was like, I don't really want to do this. And I felt like God said to me, you need to do it. And I was like, yeah, but what will this person think? Sometimes when we want to do things, we start thinking about what somebody else is going to think about what we're doing. And I felt like the Lord said to me, it doesn't really matter what they think. You let me worry about what they think. I just want you to do it. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it. And so what I began to learn is I was doing something that benefited someone, but I really did not. I was very clear. I did not want anything for this. And there's this, what I began to see is through this repetitive, through these shows that they were doing and things, what I began to learn is a lot of times how we think as humans is somebody wants something and they're willing to give something up for it, right? I mean, if you're going to go buy something if you're going to go buy I know from my grandparents living through the Depression, if tomatoes went up 15 cents a pound, they were not eating tomatoes, and they love tomatoes. So they were saying, well, okay, here's what I want. Here's what they want for it. So is it worth it? Is it really worth it? And so that's how we're all kind of wired. Somebody wants something for us. What are they willing to offer? And is this a fair balance? When you begin to do something for someone and you do not want anything in return, they know they have that. They've already got this balance thing working up. You've given them something. They owe you something. But you won't tell them what that is because you don't want anything. But they know they've got to give you something because that's how we're all wired. We all think in those terms. There's something just inside of us. So going through those things, I felt like for me, I was learning a lot about myself and about human nature. And the end result was when I got to the end of these American shows or North American shows, the very thing that I would have been willing to, if I was a betting man, I would have been very willing to go to Vegas and put money on long odds that this would not happen, actually happened. And I was taken back because through the whole process, that end thing happening was never in my mind. I know I'm being vague. I hope I'm not so vague that it doesn't make sense. But what I began to learn through all of those things is a lot of things that God asks us to do in his scriptures are not things that are just like some kind of a test. Like, okay, can you do this? Can he do this? Jump over the hoop. Okay, jump through that hoop. It's that all of these things that God has put in his word that seem so outrageous are the greatest opportunities to experience God because they go against human nature. They do. God does the impossible in situations when you are willing to put him to the test along that line. I don't think, you look at scriptures like, if going the extra mile, or if somebody slaps you on the cheek, turn the other cheek. I don't think the point of that is that if they smack you and you don't retaliate, that he just wants you to get smacked again. I don't think that is. I think he's saying you don't have to be afraid. You can step back up and set your face straight, and you can trust me. I'll take care of you. That's our Philippians 3:16. And those things, as people are watching around us, I mean, how many times have you been affected by someone that you saw go through something and it made an impression on your mind? You just couldn't shake it. You just kept seeing it and going, that doesn't make sense. What have they got? What's going on there? And so as I was thinking about these things about relationships, through all of those experiences, I began to get this this understanding for myself that the best way to connect was just make myself a servant, do more than what was expected, be willing to pick up slack for people who would be happy for somebody to pick up, do the things you're not expected to do. And what I found was, I actually, you would think, if you got to do stuff that nobody else wants to do, you would think that would be like really draining and depressing. And after a while, and sometimes maybe it was a little bit, but I began to realize this was connecting me to people. And there were people that were gravitating toward me that I wanted to somehow have a relationship. And I don't mean the really popular people. I mean, they're great too. Everybody is on the same level. So it's not like you look at this, well, they're the servant group, so therefore they're more important. No, it's not. Somebody asked me one time, they said, wow, you get to travel with those musicians and be with them? That must be incredible. And I was like, if you ever really experience God, mere mortals are not that impressive, okay? So, I mean, they're great guys. I love them all. I really do. But I began, and then you got to be careful. I mean, you got to be careful too, because you don't want to get like puffed up about being the great servant or something along that line. That doesn't work. That's like counterproductive. But I found out people that I could never probably connect with because I cared about them I could feel that there was something that was connecting, and there was influence, and influence in the sense of, I don't want to influence somebody to do something out of just my strong personality, but I would like to open them to the influence of God through what he's doing and teaching me, that it's okay, that really the greatest life is the life of the servant. And Jesus tried to get some of these thoughts across. He said, when you throw a party, don't invite your friends. Okay, and that's like, well, that's crazy. No, invite the people who you can't benefit from. Invite the people who are not going to, you don't want anything from them. They've got nothing for you. But this is like the greatest opportunity to make more friends. I mean, after a while, I guess there'd be nobody to invite, because it is caring and reaching in that relationship. The world is looking for that. People want to have a real relationship that has meaning, that's not just superficial, that someone really cares and that they can care for, that we all long for that. But sometimes it takes people being able to, and I think it only happens through the Spirit of God, that can actually reach out and connect to those that don't seem connectable. I remember when I was coaching Little League Baseball or Dixie Youth, and I loved all these kids, and I liked to win just like everybody else, but I wanted all the kids to somehow contribute. But what I began to discover in kids, a strong personality trait, is some kids would just mess around and sabotage themselves because it was easier to control your own failure. It's easier to say, well, I wasn't successful because I didn't try. I never tried to be successful. I tried to be unsuccessful. Therefore, I was successful at being unsuccessful. I mean, we need control, right? We want to control. Nobody likes me because, frankly, I don't want to be liked by anyone. But that's not really what's in the heart. People want to be liked, but they're so afraid of rejection and that they'll put their best out there and it won't be good enough. I mean, I'm sure that I'm not the only one that's experienced that on both sides of the coin. But I found that with those little guys, if they could somehow experience just a little bit of success and be a part, they may never be the most important or the biggest aspect of the team, but they began to feel connected as a team. And that's what God calls us to do, is to interact with those. And what I've found is some of those people that were very difficult to connect with, they become some very, very good, dear friends, that there's a bond that's been built there. And so, those are just the things. I wish I had some people, they can get to the end of something and they can like hit you with a credible punchline, and then there's great applause, which hold please. I don't want applause. I've had too much applause from Neil. So at the boat thing when he asked everybody to applause twice. So, but I'm not really going to do that. But I would like to say this, is that if you're feeling something on your heart and you feel like a little inspiration of something, maybe that's just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it doesn't even really fit or make sense, but I'm kind of feeling this. Don't be afraid to share that and contribute in that way, because it may be that it could be the little small thing that you're willing to give that might have the greatest impact, more impact than abundance of words will ever have. So so while you're thinking about that, because if nobody wants to or feels to, then I'm, that's not my call. But if you do, don't miss that opportunity, because you'll find when you're willing to give something freely and become a little vulnerable, that's when you really receive. And I'm going to tag one more thought on here. So I'm sorry, it came to my mind, but I want to tag my Christmas message on. Can I do that really quick? You guys, I mean, it's almost Christmas. But everything that happened to Jesus, I believe, is relatable to us. Somehow we should relate to it and be able to impact our lives and give us direction. And I think about his birth, and they put him in a manger, right? And that word for manger there could mean like little feeding trough, but it could also be a bigger word that encompasses like a stall, place that they kept livestock, and it probably, like you see the little nativity scenes where they got the little 4 poles up, and they got these little branches over the top of it, and it's got to give a little protection and shade. And I've thought about that in relationship to something that Israel had to observe every year, and to be an Israelite in good standing, 3 times a year you had to observe 3 feasts. You had to observe the Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Booths. Now, just dealing with the Feast of Booths, what it was is they built a little lean-to, something like that, and they had to put these branches over the top of it. Looked kind of like a stall. And they had to let sunlight through, and it had to let wind and rain through, but it could provide some shade. And the reason why they were doing that, they would celebrate that every year, is because they were showing, when they would do that every year, they were hearkening back to their wilderness experience, and it was showing that God was ultimately their protection. They were vulnerable, but God provided for their needs. And to me, it's just really, really interesting that, that Jesus, this is what he's born under, or where he spends his first days is under something very similar to that. And really, that's very symbolic of his entire life. He made himself vulnerable through his entire life that God might be able to show himself through that life in his protection and his care. And I'm sure he believed in turning the other cheek, right? But when he kind of upset him one time, they were going to throw him off the hill. They couldn't find him because they didn't know what somehow he looked different or something. God provided a way for his escape in those things. But he lived his life that way. I think it's okay to live our lives that way, with vulnerability, giving where we don't expect to receive back, reaching out where we can't, there's nothing that can reciprocate. I think that's what gives God the greatest opportunity to express himself in our lives. And that's where we really, really find him. So those things that he asks us to do are not something to see how disciplined we are or how much pain we can take. He's saying these are the keys to finding me. You want to really know me? Do these things and watch what happens. Do you really want to know him? Is it worth it? Is it? And I've asked myself one time, and I promise I'll stop after this, but I was thinking on some things a lot like this, and my son, he was a big Lost fan. Do we have any Lost fans in here? Mm-hmm. We had a few. Okay. So I won't go into the whole story, but he asked me one time, he goes, "Dad, you got to sit down. You got to watch one episode. You're going to be hooked. You got to watch one episode with me." And I was like, okay. So I sat down, and whatever it was, there's a boat, and these 2 guys are sitting on the boat, and one guy's been on this island for a couple hundred years, and the other guy's only been on a few years. So the guy that's been there a couple hundred years says, "There's got dynamite in this boat." He goes, "I want you to light this fuse." And he goes, "And then you run." And the guy's like, "I'll light the fuse if you'll answer some questions." And he says, "Okay." So he lights the fuse. The fuse is running. And he asks him, "Why do you want me to do this?" And he says, "Well, I believe that I'm done. I'd rather die than live here any longer. And for some reason on this island, I can't kill myself. But you can kill me. If I light the fuse, I'm not going to die. But if you light the fuse, I can die." And so they get through, he's asking a bunch of other questions, and then the older guy, the guy that's been there for so long, says, "Are you going to run?" And he turns to him and he says, you know, I'm like you. I think I'm in the same situation. I don't think I could kill myself either. I think it applies to me. And he goes, I'm willing to sit here and find out if it's true or not. And that's probably kind of, bizarre. But sometimes God can speak to you through some real bizarre stuff. There was things I was thinking about, and I felt like God said to me, how bad do you really want to know? You willing to, put yourself at risk to find out? So if I have a closing line, it would be, are you willing to put yourself at risk to find out if the things of God are really true? Or if you're believing a lie? Because if it's not true, I'd rather just blow up with all of it than to continue to believe a lie. To this point, I just haven't found anything that hasn't proved out to be true for me. So if anybody else have anything they would want to share, this is your opportunity.
But there's a long history with me and God, and so like you're saying, you don't really know if he's true or not. And so for me, I had grown up in church, and then I had this huge devastation in my life. Like, it was not just a minor thing, and it was kind of like people like who know the whole story have talked to me since then. They go, how is it that you're still like committed to Christ? Like, why didn't you like turn your back and just run away? Because that was really awful, and they don't know the whole story, and it was awful. And I said to him, I'm like, it's because I knew that if God was true all those years when I was growing up, all those years when I was serving him as a missionary, all those years I was teaching other people how to become missionaries and serve Christ overseas, because if God is really true, if John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that's because he loved us. That's because he loves me. So if God is really true, then the circumstance, while it totally sucks, doesn't mean that God's lied to me about anything else. Like, that's just our circumstance. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we get caught up in, we can memorize scripture and have great intercession times, and then something happens, and our life gets turned upside down, and we go, yeah, we're good, like, God, I don't want any of that. But if God is really true, and we hit those circumstances, and then we cling to him, and then cling to him some more, and then continue to cling to him, because what you're looking at is a circumstance that looks real ugly, kind of like a crime scene ugly, but God still is there with you. So sometimes we go through those circumstances so that our paradigms of God can change, so that we're no longer looking at God as just like the person we go to for prayer or for good times or for feeling nice about ourselves or nice about dressing up for church on Sunday. Or we go to there because we need to know who God is in the nitty-gritty parts of our lives too. And that's where there's a transformation of our mind towards Christ. And I don't know where I was going with all this, but that's kind of what I wanted to say. I was just that, we sometimes get tripped up with life. We get tripped up with, he didn't answer the way I wanted to answer, or he didn't part the waves when I wanted him to part the waves, and there wasn't some magic wand that came out and changed and solved my life. That's good, because God sits with you in that. God sits with you in those hard times. And I don't know what happened to your friends in the boat, but I think that I know that the God that I grew up knowing, and the God that I've known since, is so much bigger than anything else, and so much better, and so much more true than I think I ever knew. And so, I don't know if that's where you're going with this whole thing, Todd, but that's what I'm going to say.
Last year, of course, everybody knows that we went through some kind of hell with him in the hospital, being so sick. And at one point during the hospital stay, I realized I felt like I really needed to document some of the things that he had gone through. And and I didn't know why, and I did it on Facebook many times. I also documented it in books and such. But probably in the last, since November, he's gone through a lot more things. And I asked the Lord, I said, his tumor started to grow again, and it's affecting his eye, and I was like, are you serious? Like, can you give the kid a break? Can you give me a break? Like, what in the world? And on my Facebook, nearly every day, something was popping up, and I was reading some of the things from a year ago that I had put down, and how I was thanking God for saving him, and that I knew God was going to touch him in some way or another. And I'm not a writer, but I was reading those things, and every day I was getting more and more encouraged, and I could feel the Lord telling me it was going to be okay. Well, just I think it was in December, Justin was going in for another MRI, and it was really very serious. The doctors were saying they're not sure they can do anything for him, and anything they could do was so dangerous that it would cause brain damage or multiple things. And I was sitting in the MRI. They had taken him back, and this lady walks in, comes out of the MRI, and she's all flittering about, and she looks at the lady. She goes, "Oh, my appointment isn't for another hour and a half." And she said, "Can you just take this tag off of me?" She goes, "I'm just going to sit down and read some books and just wait here," which was really odd. Nobody wants to sit in an MRI waiting room. And so she sat there, and out of the corner of my eye, I'm reading a book, and out of the corner of my eye, she's ripping pages out of the magazine. She's like stealing these recipes, like just pulling. I mean, she's got a stack. And I'm just chuckling to myself. Well, she caught me looking. And she goes on to tell me how, she wants to make her daughter some kind of really big meal for Christmas. She's been going through some lung issues, and, she didn't, elaborate. And she said, "Well, what are you in here for?" And I said, "Well, my son, he has a tumor." And she stopped me. I mean, mid-sentence, she goes, "Hold on. Take my hand." And I mean, this lady I don't know from Adam. I don't know if so I give her my hand, and she starts to pray for Justin. And in the middle of the waiting room, I mean, there's other people there, they're listening. We're not talking quietly. She's like from that chair to where I am. So she reaches over, grabs my hand, and starts praying out loud. Beautiful prayer. And she goes on, to ask the Lord to touch Justin and to touch me as mom, and so then she's done, and I thanked her, and I had tears in my eyes because it was very sweet. And she starts to pull out more stuff out of her magazine, and all of a sudden she darts up and she looks at me and she stands up and she goes, "Your son, God's going to heal him. It's going to take some time." She said, "But he's going to be whole again." And she said, he's still got a lot to go through. So don't get weary. Don't get weary. And she went on for about 15 minutes just pouring into me what she felt like God had talked to her about, which was everything I needed. But it led up, all that leading up to, that was stuff I had done the year before, which I don't ever post on Facebook. I mean, I might share something, but some of these were long posts. And I was giving my heart about my son. And so those things came back and gave me something to hold on to. And then this random lady in the MRI place, she spoke into my heart, and I know the Lord, I know he saw everything, and that's just something little. Maybe not everybody else would see it the way I did, but I know the Lord sometimes I need to be knocked in the head again and say, "Hey, I'm here. I've got it covered. Just hold on."